Research Administrator Day has been an annual event around the world since 2015. On this day, we recognize all the professional staff who work behind the scenes to keep research projects on course. At OUCRU, we celebrate every year. We want to acknowledge and celebrate the contribution our support staff make to our research. Let's hear from OUCRU Director Guy Blake. This year, 2020, has been an extraordinary year for the administration of research. There has been a global pandemic and a global response. As our grant manager Katrina Lawson points out, this year there has been a lot of work which needed a big effort from the research support teams.
Hi everybody, 2020 has been an extraordinary year. We've had a lot of things happen this year that were completely unexpected and we've never had to deal with before. But in our research administration community, although it's been a challenge that's come with lots of opportunities and lots of ways to learn how to work differently. And I'm so proud of all the work that we have done in OUCRU and even in our whole network around that. We've got people working from home, we've got people using all sorts of new kinds of communication tools, we've got lots of changes to the way that we're doing our finance system, for example. It's just been an incredible challenge, but a challenge that has been worth it. I want to say Happy Research Administrator Day, everybody. Take the chance to celebrate all of our successes, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all at the webinar.
At OUCRU, we like to use this occasion to celebrate all aspects of research support, including grants, administration, finance, estates, lab, CTU, communications, and IT. 2020 has brought unprecedented challenges and opportunities, and so we would like to connect with our peers in the rest of the Oxford Tropical Network by hosting an online event. Part of this event is a series of Zoom pre-recorded interviews with various support staff among the Oxford Tropical Network. Check out these interviews from the research support staff from across the OTN and explore how they've been dealing with the pandemic and what they will do to celebrate the Research Administrator Day.
Everyone, welcome to the Research Administrator Day webinar today, Supporting Research in 2020, Challenges and Success, organized by the Oxford University Clinical Research Unit in Vietnam. I'm Trang, the grants officer at OUCRU, and I will be your host for today's discussion. The COVID-19 has made this year 2020 a challenging year. There has been a pandemic globally which caused many delays and difficulties in our life and work. There are challenges and opportunities. Over the next 1 hour and 30 minutes, we will explore these experiences from different perspectives, different circumstances and contexts, as we will hear from 5 distinguished speakers from the OTN network. So there are Mr. David Gandhi, the Grants and Contract Manager from OUCRU Tropical Network, Sarah Barton, the Director of Operation in OUCRU Vietnam, Elena Rockliff, Research Grants and Contract Manager at the Center for Tropical Medicines and Global Health, Nuffield Department of Medicine, University of Oxford, Ms. Elizabeth Watata, the Research Office Manager at Cambridge Wellcome Trust Research Program, And from our funder, Dr. Maya Weinberg, the Portfolio Manager, Clinical and Physiological Science from the Wellcome Trust. Their talks will be followed by a Q&A section and a panel discussion around the presented topic. And if times allow, after each presentation, we will answer from 1 to 2 questions raised in the Q&A box to make sure you don't have to wait too long. During the presentation, if you have any questions or comments, please write them via the Q&A box at the bottom. If you click on that, you should be able to input those questions. And also please state where you're writing from and whom you're addressing that question to. And if that's possible, please state your name as well. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the panel discussion at the end. The webinar and the questions will be recorded. And if there are any questions that we can't get during the webinar, we will attempt to answer them by emails later. So let's jump in the discussion today. Our first presentation will be from David Gandhi, the Grants and Contract Manager from Moro Tropical Network. David has worked at the Moro Tropical Network since 2006, specializing in funding and grants. He now manages a team of 6 staff, just is focused on pre and post-award grant management with researchers across Moro sites in Asia and Africa. So now I will hand over to David.
So this is just a bit of background really about how we've been doing in terms of our applications that we've been submitting and how successful they've been over the last 2 years. So you can see that the number of applications has actually decreased year on year since 2006, but the success rate has increased. So the green is the number of applications that have been successful. The blue is the number of applications that have been submitted, and so the red line is the percentage that have been successful. So it's been going up. You can see there's a slight dip between 2018 2019, but there's it's more or less stable. And hopefully that's a suggestion that the quality of what we've been submitting has been better as we've worked to develop the skills, the support systems to our PIs, and also to help them rationalize what they should and shouldn't be submitting. So that's just a bit of background. If you go on to the next slide, please, Tran. So you can see here, what I've done is I've pulled up here a comparison of the number of applications that we've submitted between January and April 2019 and January and April 2020. So you can see that COVID led to us having a very substantial spike in applications that my team had to handle, a 51% increase in the number of applications between those 2 years. And certainly, I mean, dealing with lockdown and also the increasing number of applications we had in the first quarter, it was quite demanding, or the first 4 months of the year, it was very demanding in terms of the workload that we had to deal with and the new kind of like new normal in terms of the way that we were operating. We spent a vast amount of time on Zoom calls. So of course it's always good to have another Zoom call to remind us of exactly what it was like back then. And yeah, I mean, there were lots and lots of applications being put in. However, if you go to the next slide, Trang, you can see that overall now, the number of applications is relatively similar between 2020 and 2019. So there was a big kind of like bulge of applications that we had to submit early on. But overall, the number of applications hasn't increased. And I think that's partly because there have been so many projects that the PIs have been trying to get funding for, or they're involved with, or they're trying to manage their existing projects, that they haven't increased dramatically the number of applications overall. So we've had, I wouldn't say we had a breathing space, because we've had a lot of other work that's not pre-award to do. So we've been doing a lot of contract negotiation, and I've been supporting our post-award team to implement projects with the PIs. But we haven't seen a kind of exponential growth, which I feared we might do in terms of the number of applications that have gone in. I guess one question really is if, as we now start to see a second wave of COVID cases in the West, whether that's going to lead to an increasing amount of new funding becoming available and a second wave of funding applications. But we'll have to wait and see exactly how that's going to manifest itself. And Trang, if you can just go to the next slide, which is my last one. And that just goes to show you the number of applications that we've had, which are specifically COVID related versus applications that are non-COVID related. And that's from January up until, from January this year up until September. So it's kind of a real-time figure. So that gives you an idea of where things stand at the moment. So that's, I focused largely on pre-award. I'm sure as we get into discussions, or if you've got questions, we can talk about post-award and so on. I think, just kind of like one thing that I would say is that we've obviously had this COPCOF study that we've been leading on, which is a very large $7 million Wellcome Trust project that is looking at hydroxychloroquine and using it as a preventative treatment in healthcare workers. And because of the various politicized angles and the paper that was published in the Lancet that had dubious data in it and so on, it has been beset with challenges. And that's taken up an awful lot of our management team's time in terms of trying to resolve those, trying to find or trying to recruit patients, trying to identify countries. And so it has been, it's been quite a challenge. And I think now, as the second wave is starting, we're going to see an increasing number of people who are willing to participate in countries that are willing to participate in that study. I think it kind of was a bit slow getting off the ground. And by the time we were really in a position to start recruiting, the number of patients in many countries was starting to plateau or decrease. And so as a result of the second wave, I wonder if we're going to see an increased uptake. But it's been a project that's taken an awful lot of time for many of our senior staff. So that's just something that's kind of like going on in the background as we may be looking at other applications that we apply for. Okay, that's me done.
Thank you, David. Yeah, there's a question for you, David. How do you rationalize what people should and should not be submitting application?
So I think one of the main things that I've been doing is trying to make people think about, first of all, how likely they are to be successful in securing funding from a particular scheme that they might be looking at, how well their project fits with the criteria that the donor's setting, also the sum of money that's available and whether it's really worth their while to spend a lot of time writing an application that might not necessarily give them that much funding. So trying to think about, trying to figure out how much time it's worth to spend on a relatively modest project, or if it's worth them spending a lot of time on a project that's going to potentially give them a much bigger grant. So I think those are the main things that I've been asking them to consider, is really whether or not it's worth their time and how likely they are to be successful. So to kind of look, do a bit of navel gazing and really consider whether or not this is the right thing for them to do. I think with the Wellcome Trust, we're particularly lucky because the Wellcome Trust, and I'm not just saying this because Maya's on the call, but one of the things that is good about the Wellcome Trust is they're very, very open to having discussions before we submit applications at any level, whether it be a kind of like a junior fellowship or like a master's fellowship or something at a much more senior level. And I think that dialogue is absolutely invaluable and something that I'd like to see more donors doing, because it really helps, our PIs to direct their efforts to the schemes that are most appropriate for them to secure funding from.
Yeah. Thank you. There are other questions for you, but I think we can keep it for the final discussion.
Sure.
So now I'd like to invite the next speaker for today, Sarah Barton, our Director of Operation at OUCRU. Sarah leads OUCRU's business and operation team to deliver high-quality systems and service to support the delivery of numerous research grants across multiple geographic locations. Her current role as Director of Operations for OUCRU involves oversight of almost all activities which support and facilitate the research work of the unit. She takes the lead on the strategic planning process, financial planning, and risk management. So, Sarah, over to you.
So it's interesting, really, because for me, 2020 has, on the one hand, felt like it's lasted a lifetime. And on the other hand, when I actually came to try and think of what I wanted to say about it, I had, you know, just a few key points that kind of really stuck out for me. So I thought, first of all, I'd just say, just in 1 minute, because Trang, I know, is a very strict timekeeper, just some context about where we are in terms of OUCRU. So it's been fascinating because we are in 3 countries. So we're in Nepal, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and we have 3 very diverse situations. Nepal and Indonesia are more similar. Vietnam is an outlier by any standards, global or regional, in terms of the way that the COVID pandemic has been dealt with and what's happened. Having said that, across the 3 countries, in fact, when you list down what we've been doing in response to it, being involved in diagnostics, being involved in the clinical care of COVID patients, setting up the trials, being involved in trials like the Cockcroft study Dave just referred to, getting involved with the National Institutes of Epidemiology and getting involved in the surveillancing. Actually, that's been standard across all 3 countries. So whilst we've got very diverse COVID situations, case numbers, deaths, rollouts, etc., actually the engagement we've had is very similar. So sort of changes, what's changed? Well, obviously we don't normally stop and start studies with such a degree of regularity. But I think what's interesting about that is the notion of how much we rely on partners. So quite often in our clinical trials, for example, we do use our own network of staff to visit the hospitals, etc. But in the course of COVID, obviously that's been much more difficult. Staff movement has been much more difficult during lockdowns. Obviously there's a risk management towards exposing staff. And so our reliance on partner has really come to the fore. And the studies that have, if you like, lasted longest and started up again first have been the ones that have largely been run by those partners. I think the other thing in connection with partners is the imperative we've all felt to help and support our hosts. So in all of our countries, we're either based within a big government infectious diseases hospital or we're very, very closely affiliated to one. And obviously their need to be able to move from running 2 COVID tests a week to running 1,000 a night has had a direct knock-on effect as to how we've been able to operate. I think it's interesting, our risk appetite has also slightly changed. On the one hand, it's just the same. Health and safety of staff is of the utmost paramount importance. On the other hand, there has been a slightly more, and I slightly hesitate to say this with Welcome So Close, but there has been a slightly greater appetite for risk in terms of expenditure to ensure that safety. So early on, the limitations around PPE, for example, absolutely led to somebody's got 50 boxes, buy them. Oh, somebody's got an extra moth, buy it, put it in the store. We're running out of space, don't worry, we'll find space. So I think the sort of risk in terms of financial expenditure, not health and safety, has been something that's changed. We've obviously had to accommodate, linked to the diagnostics, I guess, as much as anything, sort of quite big physical rearrangements. I mean, here in the building where I'm sat, we ended up devoting, 1.5 laboratories that we would usually use for other space, for other things. We donated our specimen reception. We set up 24-hour cover from within our laboratory teams to make sure that happened. So there's been some physical restructuring as well. And I guess the other change I really noticed is the priority on mental health. I think in all honesty, it was always going up the agenda, and people were talking about it, and we were discussing policies, etc. But with the change in working arrangements here in Vietnam, with the introduction of very, very severe quarantine requirements, you know, I think mental health is now a reality, and our awareness around it is a really important feature of our work. So looking at the challenges and successes, which we've experienced over the year, I mean, without wishing to be a cliche, I think some of our challenges actually have been our successes. So I think we've managed to institute a pretty systematic program-wide set of communication. And we've managed within that to be selective in the sense that, you know, what somebody sat in Jakarta needs to hear is different from what somebody sat in Hanoi needs to hear. But the structures that we've put in place around that communication have worked well across the programme. We did quite rapidly put in place a significant sort of crisis management infrastructure, from a leadership crisis team to a research grouping of leading all of the research work of where we were getting involved, and then a sort of partner team of operational staff. And again, that was program-wide, so across the countries, which is something that we've previously challenged to do, and found challenging to do, but it turns out if you sit at home for long enough with a Zoom in front of you, that actually talking to somebody in another country appears to be just as easy as talking to somebody in the next door house. So that's been an interesting feature. I think that just the challenge of staff protection, the risk assessments that have gone with whether people work on wards, whether people, you know, continue studies, how to get PPE, how samples are handled coming into the building, that has been a challenge. And I would say we have been very successful. We have unfortunately now had positive staff cases in 2 of our 3 countries, but even then they've been handled superbly, I think, in the terms of making sure that there was limited exposure, that the person was kept informed and kept in touch, and that their mental health was looked after. IT services, you know, COVID-19 would not have been possible without the IT services team and their ability to very quickly ratchet up remote working. So big challenge. We are fortunate in many of our countries that our internet provision is adequate. I know that's not the case for some of the other panel speakers, but I think it was a big challenge, and the team really rose to the occasion. So what will last? I think, you know, what's going to last out of 2020 when we do move on, as we invariably will from being in the thick of the pandemic? Well, I just thought I'd take the sort of top 4 or 5 things that I've been thinking about and say, I guess just give an opinion as to whether they would or wouldn't last. So working from home versus working from the office. Now, when we were all at home, which we're lucky that we're no longer at home, we all, well, it's a generalisation, many of us swore that we would never go back to this. You have to be in the office from 8:30 till 4. You have to do this in the office. You have to sit behind your desk. I'd have to say here in Vietnam, where we have been very fortunate with the government response and the limited number of cases, almost as soon as it was possible for everyone to come back into the office, everybody came back into the office. And we very quickly went back to exactly the same situation in terms of physical working, of being here at 8:30 till 4. Oh, where's so-and-so today? Oh, they're working from home. Ooh. So I'd have to say, much as we all said it would last, that particular one I'd say hasn't lasted. Programmatic approaches, so across all 3 countries, I think that has fundamentally changed what we do, and I think that will continue to do so. I think we will be changing the way we communicate and the way we're structured and our, you know, maybe even our committee structure as a result of COVID, and I think that would be good. The spending risk appetite that I mentioned, yeah, that's gone away quite quickly as well. I think communications improvements on the whole, I think they'll stay. It's very difficult to know whether they will or won't, but I think some of our sort of programmatic wide ones will last. And the great unknown, particularly sitting in Vietnam, where it is so difficult to enter the country such that you don't ever leave it, I think there's a real question around the psychology of work travel and to what extent this pandemic and our experiences of it will fundamentally change how we work. So when I asked the question, you know, what will last from the pandemic, all I can say is, well, what a jolly good question that is. I think it's very difficult to tell. But those are my thoughts, and I just say thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for a very interesting talk. So we are running time, so I will skip the question for you and move quickly to the next speaker, Elena. Elena is the grants and contract manager at the Center for Tropical Medicine and Global Health, Nuffield Department of Medicine at University of Oxford. Elena oversees the research funding pre-award activity of the Center for Tropical Medicine and Global Health for the Africa and Asia program at the University of Oxford. Her main responsibility include managing the research grant team pre-award, supporting UK and overseas academic staff in the preparation of grants applications, budgeting, acceptance, and setup of new award, research-related contract management, due diligence, and the dissemination of relevant information to academic and research staff. So, Elena, over to you.
Thank you very much, Trang, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor to sit here and talk a little bit about our experience from the UK Oxford. I'd like to start my presentation today by giving you a little background about who we are, what we do, and where we sit in the bigger picture. We are a team of 9 research administrators, myself included, supporting the pre-award activity of our AAPs in Vietnam, Thailand, and Kenya. Together with our grant and finance colleagues at the AAPs and in Oxford, we support the review, approval process, and submission of grant proposals, and the setup of awards and collaborative agreements in the university systems, ensuring compliance with the funders' terms and conditions, the university processes, and compatibility with the AAP's local systems. We have 4 programs in Vietnam, Thailand, Kenya, and UK. We employ 220 staff in Oxford, 2,000 staff at the overseas unit, and we support 72 PIs based at the AAPs and in Oxford. To put things into perspective, TropMed is one of 5 units within the Nuffield Department of Medicine, which is one of 16 departments in the Medical Sciences Division. However, in terms of activity and size, we are larger than other departments in the Oxford University or other UK universities altogether. We bring in over £60 million research income per year, which is around 10% of the entire university's annual research income. And we have a portfolio of around £340 million active awards. This year has been extraordinary on all levels. It has pushed our boundaries. It made us slow down and accelerated our heartbeats. We started working from home in mid-March, and half a year later, amid a new spike in the infection rate in the UK, we continue working from home until further notice. We soon realized that the VPN wasn't prepared, that many of us needed laptops that needed to be set up. We became reliant on each household's Wi-Fi connectivity, often unreliable, and access to our databases and local drives has proved problematic too. At the same time, many of us have had to prioritize their families, worrying about close family members losing their jobs and financial security, while others have struggled with isolation. In the middle of it, we have had 2 experienced staff leaving the team, while the remaining 3 experienced staff have had to train and support 4 new starters, as well as handling increased levels of activity and managing difficult personal circumstances. It soon became apparent that well-being, both mental and physical, was paramount. And as a manager, I prioritized keeping in touch with the members of my team, supporting the team both with work, but more importantly, providing much needed moral support. During the last 6 months, it was very easy to forget what we were all working for. At the end of each day, we are all grateful that we still have a job and that we are healthy. But what about what we do and the impact of our work? We are fortunate enough to support an area of research that is crucial at this moment in time. Every now and again, we are reminded that the research we support has a huge impact, whether we hear about it in the national and international news and recognizing some of the academics that we work with, or just by looking at the numbers. This gives us a sense of purpose and pride in what we do and motivates us to keep going. During the first 8.5 months of this year, we supported the submission of 188 grant proposals, which already exceeded the number of total proposals submitted last year. Out of the 188, 53 were COVID-19 proposals. We supported the setup of over 100 awards with a total value of over £35 million, out of which over £11.7 million was COVID-19 research funding for 16 awards. We have all slowed down our normal pace and become more aware of the need to be kind to us and to oneself, but also it made us realize that life can go on with less impact on the environment. We're heading towards the end of this year with stronger relationships and with the hope that we will soon meet again and go back to the office and the social environment that we all miss. But at the same time, realizing that much of the work can also be done remotely when IT systems cooperate, of course. Last but not least, it is important to celebrate the not so obvious success of showing up each day and doing our best to stay positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, for your presentation. There is a question for you. Just come up. Do you have any words or advice or encouragement for people working in the research support in this challenging period?
It's very difficult because everyone's experience has been different. But I think at the end of the day, we should try our best to stay positive and try not to think of the bigger picture and the whole situation in the world, but focus on the here and now and on the little successes. And eventually this shall pass.
Thank you. So let's move up to our next speaker, Elizabeth. Elizabeth shares grant calls and fellowship for those who may be interested and coordinate application process with inputs from relevant departments before grants is submitted for funding consideration and assist grant setup if successful. She also provides office and administrative support to the executive director and the program as large. So Elizabeth, I'm glad to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Tran. Hi, everyone. I am Elizabeth and I'll try and share our challenges I'll share our challenges and successes from Africa. So to begin with, all the activities stopped because we received a government directive to stop people from coming to work and ask them to go home. So we sent everybody home except for a very few staff and those who are based in the wards and those who are working in those who are based in the wards and those who are in the labs. But then we were identified as a testing center for the region by the government. So that means we had to recall everyone back to work. But then we recalled everyone and we used an elimination criteria for underlying factors like those who are aged and those who had diseases like high blood pressure. We could not recall them to work. So that means we recalled people, but it was a leaner staff for us. And this came with challenges because it is a small staff. We had to observe the social distancing. And then those who are working from home, we have very poor internet coverage, sorry. So things were not the way they were, but we managed to get through it. And then setting up the Chadox vaccine trial has also been a challenge because it has attracted a lot of media attention. And then what changed for us was having to conduct or carry out activities at the program through virtual meetings and conferences, which require a lot of time to plan. And then we have also a change to adopt paperless, working to minimize risk and contact. The lessons we've learned from all of this was, yes, we could adopt paperless working, not for all, but for some. And then we had to teach and adopt people to use electronic signatures, which is, we are still learning, it is very new. And then we planned more for virtual meetings instead of travel. We are yet to share that with the wider team if they will agree. But then also, another lesson that we have learned so far is we need to plan better next time if we are to engage in a wider communicated vaccine trial, so that we know what to communicate to the wider community. Our special contribution as a program and from the research office was support the nation in the COVID testing. And then we also supported the government through the Ministry of Health in giving weekly health policy briefs and surveillance data. That enabled the government to make decision making. And then as a research office, we tried to contact funders to consider extension for funding which was coming to an end during these 6 months. And then we supported some whose funding was coming to an end completely. And then we also supported staff who were making applications for COVID-related research. And then setting up the vaccine trial at the program was the greatest contribution for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your talk from a very far away unit from Vietnam. We have a question for you.
Yes.
For the next couple of years, there probably isn't going to be much travel. We have seen a lot of training course and conference canceled. How do you think people working in research support will be able to continue working on their professional development?
Well, travel has stopped, but we are trying to resume, though at a very minimal. We really try and consider which places people can travel. That one has yet to be finalized, but we are asking people to attend online meetings more and discourage people from traveling. But then it's yet to change. It's bound to change as we move.
Okay, thank you. Another question come up for you, Elizabeth. Did you carry on doing any community or PE work during this time?
No, when the COVID period started, no, but we have started doing community engagement work now because of the vaccine, and also part of the community, as part of the community relations, we are trying to talk to the community on how best they can protect themselves. That one we started during this month.
Yeah, so did you see a huge increase in grants application the same way that OUCRU did?
Yes, so much, yes.
So much here,
So
especially for the COVID?
Yes, everyone is applying to do research in COVID.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. So let's move to our next speaker. I will stop share my screen and I will introduce Maya from our very different perspective from the Wellcome Trust. Maya is a portfolio manager at the Clinical and Physiological Science team at the Wellcome Trust. She advised scientists applying for grants and also managed strategic initiatives. She did her PhD in immunology at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, and after that she moved to Cambridge to continue her research, which focused on autoimmunity. She interested in scientist discovery, how to make discovery happen, and how to tell people about them. Very welcome you, Maya. Over to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. This is a really interesting and useful seminar, and I'm delighted to join you. As you heard, I work at Wellcome. My first few slides actually are about Wellcome, and I understand that this audience may not need so much introduction to our organization. Trang has asked me to talk a bit about Wellcome's work during the COVID pandemic and how we've changed in response to that. So if I could have the next slide, please. You will all be aware then what we are. Maybe you won't know what Henry Wellcome looked like. This is him, and he made a lot of money in the pharma industry, and he left that in his will to form a charitable foundation. And the money he left has now grown quite a lot, and we expect to spend about 5 billion on charitable activities in the next 5 years. If I could have the next slide, please. So you will probably be quite aware of our objectives, which largely is to help ideas thrive, to improve health for everyone. Divided them in 3 broad aims of creating knowledge, strengthening research capability, using that knowledge effectively, and promoting an environment in which research can flourish. So if I could have the next slide, please. Oh yeah. So when this pandemic hit, we of course wanted to continue to work towards our overarching aim, but all Wellcome staff, and there are about 1,000 of us, started working from home on the 17th of March. And all travel for work or physical meetings were discontinued until further notice. Now we see a gradual return of staff as needed, for example, of public-facing staff in our museum collection and some other roles, but most of us expect to continue working from home for the foreseeable future. And while we were all out, our Wellcome building was turned into a respite centre for the nearby hospital, for their staff to be able to get away from the hospital, have a sleep between shifts, and get some tea and toast, etc. But this was closed in June as the need abated, and we'll keep an eye on the situation if it will be needed again. If I could have the next slide, please. So perhaps of greater importance for people who do not work for Wellcome, our response to COVID as a funder has been to quite quickly put in place a funding call for COVID-directed research activities. And this call has no set deadline, so people just get in touch with us about their ideas and they are evaluated as and when. And our funding is focused on things that can be carried out during the pandemic, will have an immediate impact, and will benefit low and middle income countries. And we have given out about 35 million so far, pound. And there are some examples on our website of things that Wellcome has funded, for example, modeling prevalence and how the virus changes in Kenya, Uganda, and the Gambia, and in South Africa, looking at how this virus affects people who are living with HIV. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. Sorry, I had no idea I'd inserted these transitions in my slide deck. So another response as a funder, of course, is the matter of the people who are already funded by us. A lot of people who have their grants finishing this year have had their research institutes shut and been unable to continue their work. So we have granted 6-month costed extensions for anyone whose award ends this year, and a 3-month costed extension for anyone whose award ends next year. We have also offered clinical secondments. So for any clinicians who are funded by a grant from us, we have offered a costed extension for anyone who is wishing to step back into the health service to support it during the pandemic. We've supported about 130 clinicians to do this in the UK, but also overseas. Wellcome also works in partnership with other organisations, and the major ones, I suppose, are the CEPI coalition, which Wellcome had a founding role in, aimed at creating vaccines, the Therapeutics Accelerator, working with other funders such as GATE to identify and screen promising drug candidates, and working on policy, where Jeremy, our director, is on the Special Advisory Group for Emergencies in the UK, and our policy and comms teams are also supporting international efforts to leverage funds to greater efforts to stop this disease. If I could have the next slide, please. There we go, finally. So practically our work, how has it changed? Well, we're all working from home, as you can see. All our committees are now online. And we have made the decision not to interview any of our applicants. Usually we interview the final step in our headquarters in London. But because so many of our applicants are from all over the world, and so are the members of our panels, it turned out to be impossible to set up virtual meetings that would be okay for everyone. And rather than disadvantage anyone, we moved to a paper-based system, or paper-based, where people will receive our questions and send us their answers. And we're continuously evaluating whether we will be changing this. We don't have any researcher meetings taking place in person, but some have been moved online, and it's quite exciting now to think about how to create good content that is valuable to people online, which is very different from the opportunities to network in person. And as some of you will be aware, the review of some large investments that were coming to an end now, site visits for those have had to be cancelled or postponed, and we've put interim funding or procedures in place for those. So if I could have the next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'd be happy to answer any questions either now or in the session after.
Thank you, Maya, for very interesting talk. I believe many of our participants are very interested with your talk at a very different perspective from the Wellcome Trust. We have a question for you. You mentioned media interest in the vaccine trial. Has it been largely positive or not?
Oh, that's a big question. And I'm not sure if I can answer that, actually. I think that any interest now in the media is never going to be all positive, because the media has their own objectives with highlighting certain stories. I don't know if that's a reasonable answer. If you'd like to do that.
Sorry if I can just chip in. I think you certainly mentioned the trials. I think the other person who mentioned those trials and the media interest was Elizabeth. I don't know, because I think the UK media and the Kenyan media are probably quite different. So it might be interesting to see what Elizabeth thinks about the media interest there.
For us, we've received a lot of media interest, but then the trial has been politicized. So the politicians have taken over. So you can imagine, not even the PI is responding to questions, it's the politicians who are battling each other. So it makes it hard for us to try to share the right content. So we've had to develop, we've had to develop a log to share it with colleagues so that they would know what to say to the community. But whatever is being portrayed in the media is just by the politician, which is not good for us.
No, that's really interesting.
Yes, and the next general elections are in the next year. So you can imagine what the politicians are saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. We still have time to go to the panel discussion, so I will raise more questions from the Q&A box for Maya. How has the Wellcome Trust considered the health and safety challenges when people work from home?
Yeah, so the consideration now to have some people come back and work in the building is roles that need to be in the workplace to be to face the public, but also for people who cannot work safely from home for whatever reason. Wellcome Trust has been very proactive in ensuring our well-being and ensuring that our workspaces are adapted as well as can be for to be able to work from home. And the continued assurance that the health and mental health of us and our families and is the most important thing. Of course, that's also combined with the time when our workloads have increased a lot because of all the adaptations that we've had to do and last minute changes to procedures and wishing to deliver good outcomes for the research community, which is also suffering at this time. So I think, but Wellcome is a large organization and has several people whose job it is to look after health and safety and employee well-being. So I think that has been a highlighted focus of the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. So I think we can jump into the panel discussion for now. So I will raise the question from the Q&A box on the panel, on the presenter. So I'd like to invite all of you to unmute, and then anyone can reply whatever. Yeah. Okay, thank you. The first question is, this question is focused, the participant would like to send this question to David. How diverse were the funders you were submitting applications to? David?
Not hugely diverse. So I think a lot of the focus was on a couple of schemes that were being run by MRC and the Wellcome Trust in particular. There was also a couple of schemes that we had that were being run through the University of Oxford. I think those were actually funded maybe by Wellcome or in collaboration with the MRC. But the diversity of donors wasn't that great. There were a number of schemes that received quite a lot of focus from investigators. So it was more really a case of it being focused on particular calls from a small number of donors.
Thank you. The next question, I think this question can be addressed to everyone in the panel. What is the big challenge in each of the unit you are working on? What is the big challenges for the organization during the challenging time?
That's such a big question, Trang. It's such a big question. Across the OUCRU program, the challenges are different. So the challenge in Nepal is the amount of staff that we have providing primary healthcare to COVID positive patients. That's probably our biggest focus. It's not our only focus, but it's a big one. In Indonesia, our biggest challenge is the sheer length of time that people have had significant restrictions in place in terms of going into the unit. And in Vietnam, I think the greatest challenge probably, when Maya referred to the number of clinicians who had very kindly almost decided to go back to their home countries or to work in a clinical setting in the countries they were in. And in Vietnam, that big challenge has meant we've had enormous problems getting them back into the country when, the case numbers in their various countries have gone down and their extra services are no longer needed. Actually, just trying to get people back in the country has been very problematic. Yeah. That would be my top three.
Okay, so I'd like to move to the next question. This question is specifically addressed to Elena. Apart from the news report and looking at the RAN's income, in what ways you are measuring the impact of COVID research across the whole network?
So apart from looking at the numbers, well, we in the grants team, we don't necessarily are able to assess the impact of COVID-19 research from a scientific point of view. But what we have seen was the spike in activity and how it has impacted the team during this period when we've had to deal with numerous IT issues, with short staffing and employing new people that had to be trained remotely. But the research, obviously, it's valuable, and we are all proud to be able to support the research. But yes, it's been a very challenging time for us all, especially because there's no end date in sight when we will be able to return to the office and will be able to socialize in the normal way, because there is so much more that you can fit in a day's work whilst being in the office and having a quick dialogue with your colleague rather than trying to arrange a Skype meeting or a suitable time. So yes, we're all very proud to see every now and again, to see on the news one of our professors delivering a speech as part of stage or otherwise, that their research is being successful. And of course we were like, oh wow, I work with this person, and it is really nice. But apart from that, we obviously can't assess the value of research from a scientific point of view. I hope this makes sense.
Thank you. Maya, I think this question is suitable for you. You already mentioned what the change Wellcome Trust has made to adapt with the current situation. And I think this question is good for you. Do you think what changes will the Wellcome Trust will continue to keep after the crisis?
It's a good question, and one worth asking, that what good things have come out of this necessary big change that can actually strengthen the organization and make the work easier or more enjoyable for the employees. I think, I don't know if it's a unique situation, but working in London is really dumb. Like, a lot of us have 3.5-hour commutes, like total, for example. So for me, living in Cambridge, it's a huge advantage to see that we can actually work remotely and work well together, not having to be in Zooms all day, but maybe working in shared documents, for example, and that sort of thing, that you can achieve a greater well-being while still delivering everything that you need to do. And I think possibly, at least for my team, and that we also really have realized how much we appreciate our colleagues and how much we enjoy and benefit from meeting up and discussing, which is something that maybe you can take for granted otherwise. I think in our processes, it has been useful to be forced to take this big leap and have so many meetings and processes completely online, to actually get comfortable to run meetings online and see that you can have productive, in-depth discussions about awards in this format as well, that you don't actually have to meet up in person to do it. So I think that there may be some ways of how we work that can be adapted. And it's a useful way of looking at our decision processes as well. It's a large organization, so as some of you will know, the time from submitting a grant to us to actually finding out how it's gone can be very long. And COVID has forced us to try to shorten that process a bit to be able to have a quick impact. And this is beneficial in some ways, but you can also see that you will have to then make compromises when it comes to governance, and you may end up, and we don't have any numbers on this, but may end up seeing less diversity and openness, because the people who will know about a call that has gone out very quickly will be the people who are already in the loop. The people you will turn to review those things will maybe be people who are already looped in. So there are advantages and disadvantages with a shorter and less bureaucratic process. But this situation has forced us into that, and then we will be able to evaluate that and look at strengths and weaknesses, and if there's anything that is valuable that we can take with us out of this.
Could I ask a follow-up question to that, if that's okay, Maya? One of the things that I certainly, and I think others, were very interested to hear was the revised interview process that you referred to, which no longer involved a face-to-face in-person interview. And I wonder if you think, sort of on reflection, having been through that now, if actually that's that's perhaps a more equitable way of assessing candidates for fellowships, in terms of perhaps making it slightly more culturally neutral as a process, and more equitable for candidates from LMIC countries. For example, I wonder if you've done any reflection on that and whether it might be something you'd be willing to keep.
We'll certainly be evaluating what the outcomes are and how everyone involved feels about the process. I think as it stands now, there's a lot of negativity towards that process amongst our panels and also amongst applicants. And certainly when it comes to fellowships, where such an important part of it is to assess the candidate's own ownership of a proposal, rather than an answer by that may have been looked over and edited by the supervisors and sponsors. You miss out on that opportunity to assess how much ownership a candidate really has at fellowship level. But as you say, it may also remove barriers, for example, for people who don't have English as a first language and who may feel more comfortable checking their answers before submitting them. So there are as always, advantages and disadvantages.
Thanks.
I received a question from a participant, and I say it's very interesting, and I myself really like this question, as I think many people would like to ask the same question. And so I would like to raise this question to all of you, and I think there will be a big discussion afterward about this question. In a lot of low countries, research support is often considered as a developing profession, and a lot of organizations really lack the structured support teams that we see in richer countries. In your experience, what areas of research support should organizations focus on first to have developed that capacity?
I just give you some of the experience that we've had here for the last couple of years. So I've been working with the unit here in Thailand since 2006, but only in the last sort of 2 years have I managed to secure commitment from management internally to recruit a team of pre and post award staff to support what I've been doing. So I've kind of gone from doing a lot of that stuff hands-on to being more of a kind of like manager, and still doing some of it, but there's a different role that I've taken on. I think it's been really good to simultaneously develop both pre-award and post-award. So that means supporting applications that are being submitted, and also supporting or developing a framework for support of PIs with local staff who are strong in finance and project administration. So there's two quite different skill sets, one doing the pre-award to do submissions, and then the post-award side. So it's, I'm not sure whether we really prioritize one over the other, but certainly I would say developing people's skills to ensure they understand the priorities of donors, so they're able to support the PIs well, and also on the other side, making sure that we've got strong post-award team who are good at finance and are able to provide that support. I think one area that I would like to see us being able to focus more on, and this is perhaps more due to the structure that we have at MORU, where we're a partnership between University of Oxford and Mahidol University, but the majority of our PIs, certainly senior PIs, are Oxford staff, is I would like to see more prioritisation of making sure that the Mahidol staff are able to apply for money. They do apply, not necessarily through MORU, they often apply through the faculty where we're based. But we also have some staff who work for MORU but don't work for the faculty. So it's a slight hybrid structure that we have. But those people who are Thai, who don't have a faculty position, but who are doing research with MORU, don't necessarily have a route for doing that. And that's something that I really want to focus on in the future, developing to give them opportunities to do that. Oxford has been very good about supporting many of their applications for junior fellowships and so on. And I want to see a continuation of that and a greater development of opportunities for them. One of the things that we're doing to support that is that we're, one of my team, Fang, spends a lot of time doing research on funding opportunities. And she's doing research which includes looking at junior fellowships for people from low and middle income countries, travel awards and those kinds of things. So really making sure that we have a very comprehensive snapshot that she produces every month of funding opportunities at all different levels of career.
Interesting. Elizabeth, I think you've got quite a wide portfolio within your job in terms of how many hats you wear. To comment on what your priorities would be in terms of developments?
For us, I think, well, from our office, I think we would focus more on empowering the young scientists by directing them or sharing them course, because most of the time we get young scientists who still want to develop in the science world and they have no idea the fellowships, the calls. So we try and support them through the right course for masters, training fellowships, intermediate fellowships. So I think right now we are trying to, but I think we can put in more energy into it so that we can develop more scientists around.
Yeah. So I mean, in a way, that's not a dissimilar position to David's in terms of trying to develop, the capacity to help those people that have less access, if you like.
Yes.
Funding and funding streams, and
Yes.
I think here we would also not be dissimilar to that. Like David, we spend time putting together funding opportunities, and we do share that around the unit. But there's definitely different levels of people and different stages of their career, and how easy or more difficult it is to find a funding opportunity that matches what would enable them to take that next step.
So I would like to address to all of you another question come from participant. Across all of you, a common term is the impact of working from home. Do you think that our work culture will make a permanent shift toward more work from home? Or do you think that once things improve, we will get back to work from office?
I'd like to think that we'll work from home on a more regular basis. I hope that she ends up going back to school where she has gone back. But that would make working from home a lot easier. The lockdown back in April and March was hard work. But yeah, I think, for us, our office has instituted a policy of encouraging staff to go in if they don't have to. If they're lab staff, then obviously they're going in every day. But if they're office staff, they tend to be going in twice a week, and that's the expectation at the moment. You can choose your days. I'm trying to basically make sure that my team have coverage in the office throughout the week. But I'm also conscious that they don't want to end up, they want to try to minimize the amount of commuting that they do, because Bangkok's a big city and commuting for them can take a very long time. So I think that the expectation that we have at MORU is that there will be a continuous involvement of working from home. Yeah, I'm a bit surprised from what Sarah says actually, but I don't know about the working environment in Ho Chi Minh. So.
Yeah, I think it was certainly surprising to me, and it's a sort of personal observation as much as anything. I think when we were all working from home, there was an absolute spectrum of how easy or difficult people found it. In my own personal circumstance, I've got a young son who was off school for what felt like a lifetime, but it was probably only 5 months. And working from home was incredibly challenging because you were trying to juggle, work calls, Zoom calls, his online learning, plus then sort of entertaining him when he wasn't online learning, etc. I found it very challenging. But but there were other people who found it a highly enjoyable experience and were actually reluctant to come back into the office. But I'd say on the whole, the expectations haven't actually changed that much. If I look back on the fact that, it's a while since we had any form of lockdown, and I would say 95% of the staff in the building are in the building every day. It hasn't really completely shifted our culture. Now, I would be interested in hearing from Eleanor and Maya in the UK, because obviously that's also gone on a lot longer than it ever happened in Vietnam. And so it might be that the duration of your lockdown and your work from home period then has an impact on how much people adopt it. I'm not sure. I don't know, Maya, you've talked about the benefits of not having to commute. Do you think it's something that Wellcome will continue to adopt? I mean, we continue to encourage it, but to some extent. What do you think Wellcome will do?
Well, I can just speak as a lowly employee here. It will be to the powers that be to decide. But I think many of us find that we can do our jobs very efficiently from home up to a point, and that it would be beneficial to make more use of that. Because before, you've just accepted that you have to spend all of this time commuting. It's what you do. You go to work, and to actually cut that time out and give it back, you can either spend it working or you can do something else, is a great benefit. So I would like to think that we will work creatively to find ways of maximizing efficiency, and that would be having a few days in the office and then maybe more time that you can spend at home. I don't know exactly how much that would be, because Wellcome is such a great place to work, and I'm sure that all of your institutes must be as well, where you have such fantastic colleagues and interesting things happening, and there are talks every day, something interesting going on, that you may gravitate towards being in more because you have that fear of missing out on cool stuff, but if we can get away from a culture of presenteeism and focus actually instead of what we want to deliver as an organization and to the employees, if new solutions can be found, I think it would be a shame if we don't use this strange situation to find some new good things we can do as well, if that makes sense. What about you, Eleanor?
Yes, I totally second what you are saying. I think we need to strike a balance. Now that we are aware that many of the things that we work on can be done remotely and can be done from home, and of course we're cutting a lot of commuting time that is otherwise wasted. And we're cutting on emissions as well. So, not going to work is actually friendlier to the environment. But yes, I think we need to strike that balance, because particularly from our experience and my team, it has been very challenging training more than half of the team remotely, with all the IT issues, with all the personal circumstances that everyone has faced with, like Sarah said, childcare and having to homeschool children from home, or having to look after toddlers. Or people have experienced the pandemic in many different ways. And yes, there were people who actually enjoyed working from home and they would like to work from home more. But I think it is very important to have that face-to-face personal interaction with people, and having that rapport that you can only build when you see the people and when you meet them. Yes, so that's about it.
Thank you, everyone. We are running out of time, and I would like to raise the last question to you before closing the discussion. So in terms of your work, what has been your proudest moment in this year so far? Elizabeth?
Well, I guess it's for me to be the overall support both to the research office and to the program, because work has increased. Working from home has increased work, but managing all through it and being able to accomplish everything that was on our table will be the greatest achievement.
How about you, Sarah?
It's such a good question. I was just thinking, wow, that was really profound, Elizabeth. I'm not sure I can follow that. What am I proudest of? Probably the team spirit that has endured throughout the entire process, and I would include that as the team spirit, including in Nepal and in Jakarta and in Vietnam. I think everyone has managed to retain their sense of humour. They have managed to retain their, flexibility and their resilience, and I think that's I'm super proud of the teams that I manage that's really been true. Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm proudest of.
How about you, David?
I think I'd also echo what's been mentioned. I mean, yeah, our team has been very strong and resilient. Various members of our team have had, difficult personal circumstances to endure through the lockdown, and have really pulled together to support one another, and continue to do so. And I think that's really, for everyone, this has been a massive shock and challenge, and a kind of, almost Hollywood movie scale, situation, disaster, whatever you want to call it. I mean, when you take a step back and you actually think about, where we're at and what's happened over the last 9 months, and what continues to be kind of billed as a very, very serious situation in some countries, or many countries, I think it's really something that we have to be proud of and keep reminding ourselves of, that the people that we work with have really gone the extra mile to provide the support to one another that they needed. And we don't know how long this is going to last for. We don't know when there's going to be a vaccine, if there will be a vaccine, and I think the challenge really does remain. But I feel like we're in a good position through the teams that we've got.
Maya?
It's a good question, because I think, and a nice question to think about, because it's easy to just think of all the things you're not delivering as well as you would like, or the things that are not working. And maybe it's easy to start taking it for granted, working for Wellcome, that Wellcome does so many amazing, unique things all across the world. But I am proud of my colleagues in the organization, and the ability to be quite flexible to quickly identify opportunities to make a difference, to support our researchers, and also to then look at what the researchers that we support are delivering. And I think that the work that's been done and the flexibility shown in the Africa and Asia programs is a wonderful example of this, actually, the resilience and the ability to take this immense challenge and then look for opportunities to grow and contribute is very inspiring. So that's what I would highlight.
Thank you. How about you, Elena?
Yes, again, I will just echo everyone. I think our proudest achievements, I can think of 2 levels. One level is the more granular team level, where I think we're all very proud of being a good team and the team spirit of all supporting each other and being aware of each other's challenges and personal circumstances and supporting each other. I can think of several occasions when members of the team have dealt with very difficult situations, and we just stuck for each other. Whereas in the office, it would have been so much easier to just, you know, go for a cup of tea in the kitchen. But remotely, it's been so much more difficult. But yet I think one of the points that I mentioned in my presentation is that we're coming out of this pandemic with stronger relationships. And that is precisely because we have stayed in touch so much more and we have supported each other more. And then on a higher scale, we are very proud of the research that we are supporting. And I remember seeing one of our professors on the news and thinking, wow, this is actually what I do. I work with this guy and look at him, you know, he's presenting his research and the success that he has seen in his clinical trial. And of course, seeing names of our PIs and academics on the news on a regular basis, it gives us all a sense of pride, and that is invaluable, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. I believe everyone has many things to be proud of during this challenging time, because challenges come with success and lessons. Thank you very much, but we are running out of time, and what we will do to continue to collect the questions, and if possible, we will get the speaker today to respond to those questions, and we will be able to post them to you via the email you provide when you register. Thank you very much for our speaker today for a wonderful sharing, and thank you very much to our participants who have joined this webinar from various locations and units. It's just a right way to congratulate the Research Administrator Day this year, when everyone from the OTN network and from the Welcome Trust can share the insight. We will send on registered participant a link to this record webinar, and we'll also share it on our communication channels for your views. Thank you very much, everyone. Happy Research Administrator Day.
Thank you, Trang.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Trang. Thank you.
Bye.
Nice weekend. Bye.
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 Bye.